Hello everyone and welcome back to our Cyberpunk street scene. So this is where we left off. Let me turn off the camera and see what we're at. So this is where we left off last week. And this week we are going to get to here or so. So this will cover the next 3 or so videos. You'll notice I moved a window, which I'll cover probably not this video, but in a couple. I talk about all this electrical stuff up here. All this stuff is pretty simple and straightforward. It's just a bunch of individual objects kind of duplicated and moved around. I'll also cover what I did to make these cables. The pipes I know I already talked about, but I'll talk about pipe intersections a little bit more too. But first, I want to talk about this. This is what I decided to go with for the vending machine. I know initially I had a big block in here that was more of a traditional vending machine that you would see in like a cafeteria. I wanted something a little bit more futuristic, so I was searching and searching for reference images and inspiration, and I came across this image from Ian Hubert, who incidentally he did the splash screen for Blender 2.83. So he's got a ArtStation portfolio, but this will probably look familiar for those of you who worked in Blender 2.83. Super talented guy. But I came across this image and I liked that it was unique. I don't know if we'll get to model anything on the inside. Might just leave that up to you. But it was an interesting design. I like the taper that kind of starts out deeper at the top and then kind of recesses towards the bottom. There's some interesting things in there. So I took that as a primary point of inspiration for this. See, I changed a few things. Mine is more tapered and harder edges. I don't have anything up here or down here. Instead, I just made kind of a centralized screen / keypad. Yeah, I think it's an interesting addition, and it will offer us some modeling challenges that we have not yet faced. So let's get right into it. I'll jump back to where we left off, so we're all starting from the same point. And first I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. First I'm going to save this as a new scene, so I'm going to increment this up to 5. Vending machine A recording is what I'm calling this. And I'm going to expand out my outliner here. First, I've got a camera in my scene because I was setting it up to do the thumbnail. I don't need the camera in my scene right now, so I'm going to select it, get out of edit mode. I'm going to select the camera, hit M, and just create a new collection called Camera and Lights. Okay, and then I can hide that. I just turn off that collection. I've also got, well, I can leave the electrical panels for now. We can hide the truss. We don't need that. And then we've got this vending machine block, which I'm going to move into a new collection as well, called Vending Machine. Okay. And then I'm going to hide the main collection, and we'll just hide the vending machine. There's going to be enough parts here that I want to keep it kind of all contained and organized. The last thing I'm going to do in the outliner, and this is a kind of important point, is I'm going to click on the little collection icon next to vending machine. Okay, that's going to highlight it a little bit, and that's going to make that the active collection, which means any new objects that I add will automatically be added to this collection. All right, now I've got my vending machine block, and I'm going to hit Alt-G. That's going to clear the location and just snap that right back to the center. And I'll hit Shift-C to center my 3D cursor as well. Okay, so I know this is what I started out with. It's still perfectly usable. It's not going to be in this shape. I will also mention I have this reference image open on my other monitor. Although at this point I have modeled this thing 4 times now. So I say that for 2 reasons. One, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going for, which is good since I'm the one recording the video. But 2, it's okay if you run into trouble and need to start over or try something different or come at it from a different point of attack. Happens all the time. It's just kind of part of the process. So now let's start with just the general form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the top down. And we're going to start pretty rough. If you want to be specific, I'll tell you the general dimensions that I'm going for. About 0.9 across the X, 0.7 in the Y, and 1.2 in the Z as far as overall dimensions. But that's going to change. That's just kind of the starting point. But I'm just selecting in wireframe mode, so I'm selecting the back vertices as well and moving them around accordingly. We'll bring that into there, and we'll look in the side view here. I'll scale it in the Y direction. Oops, select everything and scale it in the Y direction to about there. Okay. So that's about the general form that's going to take. And I can swap over to this just so we can kind of take a look at where we're going. You can see this collection is pretty well occupied. We can also turn off the truss. But we just focus here on the vending machine itself. In this video, I really want to just cover the shell, just the main body of the vending machine. Everything else, if I hide the body, everything else is pretty straightforward. Okay, this we're going to kind of, I don't want to say accidentally create, but this is just going to be made as a byproduct of the body of the machine. This is just a backup that I kept. You don't really need. Top and the bottom are very simple objects, as are all the shelves. The base is just extruded from the bottom. Again, those are really simple objects. This I just cut out of the side of the main body. And then that leaves us with the panel, which this is just a torus. See, I didn't actually even rename this, which is shame on me. But that's just a torus that I cut off part of and extruded out some of it. And then we have this screen, which is a little inset screen. And I actually made the keypad a separate object so that the edge flow wasn't too crazy all over the machine. Okay, so all that stuff's pretty simple. Really, the body of it is going to be the tricky part. Okay. So I'll unhide all of that, and we can kind of again look at our reference. And I'll just talk a minute about the plan of attack. So part of the reason why I simplified this shape is just for the sake of being able to fit this into a video or two. If I got too complicated and like having this part extrude out asymmetrically and still keeping consistent edge flow would have been tricky and add a lot more time to the model. And we do have other things to get through this semester. So you can see it's pretty apparent that this is symmetrical. We've got I had a mirror modifier on it. I recently applied that just to get this cut out. I didn't want it on the other side. Yeah, I'm trying to give you a pretty good idea of what the final thing is going to look like. If we look at the final dimensions, I'm not even sure what is that? Roughly, yeah, it's pretty close to where it was. I think I pulled the bottom down a little bit, but there's no back face. The top and the bottom are separate, and just makes it easier to add detail where we need it and not have edges running all over the place. So let's get started, now that we're 10 minutes into this video. Okay, so let's add that mirror modifier right away. So I just add an edge loop. Whoops, that did not stay in the center. Add an edge loop, right click. Okay, so you can see my object is not centered in the scene. And that will bother me. So we can fix that in a second. We'll delete these left side vertices. I will select these two vertices down here, Shift S, snap the cursor to selected, jump into object mode, and object set origin to 3D cursor. Remember, I have that on my quick favorites too, which I will use from now on as I need. And just as a quick refresher, you can right-click any tool to add or remove from your quick favorites. Once it's in your quick favorites, you can hit Q and it'll pop up that menu. The menu is also context sensitive, so if I'm in edit mode and hit Q, you can see that nothing is found, but if I'm in object mode and hit Q, you can see the tools pop up. It also reminds me I will turn on screencast keys. I updated to the most recent version of the plugin, so we should be all set there. Okay, so now that I have the origin reset, I'm going to hit Shift-C to recenter my 3D cursor, and then Shift-S, snap selection to cursor, and I'm back in the center. Okay, and we can add our mirror modifier right there, and make sure you enable clipping so that the vertices snap to the center. Okay. All right, so now we can start defining our major forms. Oh, actually, before we define major forms, let's get rid of all the stuff we don't need, which is the top face, the back face, and the bottom face. X, delete faces. Okay, pretty simple shape now. Now we can start defining our major forms. And I'm going to start with just an edge loop at the top and the bottom, and what this is going to serve to do is just kind of give a barrier for any edge loops or geometry that I add in the middle, and give me kind of a clean, flat edge to extrude down or up from if I need to grow the model, if I'm doing like these top bands or the bottom bands. Okay. I'll do the same on the back side here. I'm not going to do it on the front because we're going to be beveling the front corner, and I don't need any edges getting in the way of that bevel. Okay, and then we'll add in an edge loop there, and then another one about here. I'm kind of eyeballing this. I don't have specific measurements for this part. And then we need to define the top of this detail, which will be somewhere around here. The bottom will be somewhere around here. And then I'm going to add in 2 edge loops. And this will be the point where the taper comes in from the side. So I can go into wireframe, and I'm going to select these bottom vertices. And then I can hit G and Y, because we're in the side view, so Y. I can move it back to wherever I think looks good for the taper, and I think that looks good. I don't want to go too far with it. Okay. So there's the front of it. Now I'm going to grab this edge right here, and we're going to bevel it. So I don't want to go completely in the top view because it's tough to see what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to kind of orbit the camera around here. Control B, and something like, I'll say that. That looks pretty good. Okay. There's our bevel. And there's our, that's the general shape. Now we got the tricky part. And the tricky part, I think probably the hardest part of this whole thing, is getting these bevels in the corner. Okay, I figured out, I think, a pretty good way to do it. But it can be tricky to figure out what the geometry is supposed to look like. And we're actually going to modify from this example a little bit as well. Because I don't love, on this mockup, I don't love this. I would rather have a face go all the way through here. And so I could like merge these together, which works, but now I have a 6-sided pole, and I don't like 6-sided poles. So we're going to do something a little bit different, I think. Although also, probably just delete. Yeah, but I've got edges flowing all over the place, so it doesn't really work on the example. But we'll keep that in mind as we work forward. All right, so we're going to work on this lip that goes all the way around. So again, we need to first start adding some edge loops to define where that lip is going to be. I'm also going to do an additional step, which you don't need to do, but it's just to help you kind of see what I'm doing, because when I start adding a bunch of edge loops, it can get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to add two materials. This one I'm just going to call gray, and the next one I'm going to call darker, or maybe we'll say gray, darker. Okay. I'm not going to adjust the surface at all. I just want to go to the viewport display and turn that down. This way I can set individual faces to be a little bit darker. I'll show some contrast and you'll be able to see more what I'm talking about. Okay. So I need to define where this outline is going to be. And I'm going to, first I'm going to add an edge loop up here, and this is going to be the top band. It's going to come across and then it's going to come down. Right? I can actually, I'll bring up our draw tool, and oops, there we go. Right, so we're going to have this band that goes up, down, and it's going to follow this taper around, and then around the bottom. Okay, and then as we get to the front, it's also going to come across, over, and up. Okay. So, rid of those. So this top edge loop is the first step of that. Just stay inside view for now. Next, as I'm looking at this, I think I want this edge to be back a little bit further. I want a little bit more room in the glass here. I'm just going to select that edge, just move it back. Actually, we can use this existing, maybe not quite so much. We'll slide that up. One thing to be mindful of is we want a consistent thickness to this rim. So I want to make sure that as I'm defining this edge, the thickness is the same. So you can see if we measure this, I'm not actually measuring, but I'm looking at this thickness versus this thickness, and I want them to be pretty close. I'm not going to go so far as to actually use the measure tool. I'm just going to go by eye. We can look at this corner square here and make sure that that is square. So that's pretty close. Okay. So we're going to follow this down across the taper. Then it's going to turn across at the bottom here. So we'll add in our edge loop here. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now across the front. Again, if we check our reference image, we've got this little cutout, and that's where the opening is, where you get whatever it is that's being vended. So we're going to add an edge loop across here, and one around here. Now it can be tricky to visualize this when you're only looking at half of the wireframe. So if I go to my mirror modifier and just enable this button, which will show the mirrored cage in edit mode, then we can kind of get a look. Say if this is roughly that door, okay, then we can even use that darker. So that's the door. Then I probably want to bring this up a little bit more. Maybe something more like that. Or I can give myself a little bit more room. Check my reference here. and give myself a little bit more room, and then take this edge loop and move it in. Just double tapping G to enter edge slide mode. Okay. So I think that's probably going to be pretty good for that thickness. Maybe we can move this down a little bit. Something like that. Okay. And then I'm going to add the edge loops in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to select these faces. It's going to give them the regular material, because I want to focus on this area. So this is where, hit C and we'll do circle select. I'll make that the darker gray, because that's the rim. Incidentally, at this point it starts looking like a poorly rendered helmet. Though I suppose you could use these same techniques to make a helmet. No reason why you couldn't. So looking at this, I think I might actually want to bring these up. G, Z. I'll bring these over. GX. Okay. Now, the next thing is I really would like, if I add an edge loop, I would like that edge loop to follow this darker area. I want it to follow around the rim. So that, combined with the fact that I want there to be bevels in the corners here, means we've got some work to do with the geometry. Okay, and that's going to be a tricky part here. One thing before we start that is, at this point, we basically have the glass figured out. I'm going to hit C, and I'm going to circle select all the faces that are going to make up the glass. And I'm going to hit P to separate that by selection. And then I'm going to rename that. I'm just going to name it VM underscore glass. And at this point, we can rename the vending machine body. Oops, not Bondi, body. Rename that accordingly. Then I'll hide the glass. I'm also going to, in my outliner, I'm going to turn on a few more options. We have the little arrow, which will turn on the selectable toggle. Then we have display or disable in viewports. And we have disable in renders. I like to have all four of these on. The nice thing about the viewport toggle, instead of just hiding, is if I hide something, hit H, and then let's say I hide this as well and hit Alt H, they both come back, right? But if I tell the glass to not show in the viewport, and then I hide the body and then Alt H and show the body again, that glass doesn't come back because it's still turned off in the viewport. It's like a more permanent hide in a way. I find it rather helpful. Okay, back to it. So we've got that out of the way. This also simplifies the geometry. Now that we don't have a face running all the way down, if I add an edge loop down here, it won't travel all the way up. So it's some nice isolation that way as well. Okay. I'm also, at this point, I'm just going to I'll turn off the mirror edit cage, and I'll turn off the mirror, I think, completely for now. We'll just focus on this part. Okay. So you might be tempted to bevel the vertices. If I select these two, you can right click and bevel vertices, but it gives this really weird geometry solution that I don't really care for. It does work. Okay, so I was all set to show you a trickier way to do this, where you add in some edge loops here, and then you add in, oops, before you do that, this is the way that I'm not showing you, but I'm also showing you. Right, where you fill that in, and then you join those, and then use the knife tool to cut across. Right, and then you merge vertices, and but I just found a new way with the bevel, as I was telling you how I didn't like it. It just kind of clicked for me. So let's do it the easy way. We're going to select the vertices that we want to bevel, which are going to be all these outside ones, and actually this inside corner as well. We can probably just leave that one alone. And right click, bevel vertices, Shift Control B is the shortcut. We go about there. Okay, so this is where it doesn't really work over here because it gives us a triangle, so I'm going to exclude that one. I'm going to exclude both of those. We're just going to use it for the side here. Oops. Shift Control B, there we go. And right about there is pretty good. Okay. And then I'm going to select, circle select all these vertices that are attached to the corner. Hit X and dissolve them. Actually, let's dissolve the edges instead. Yeah, that works. And then we can just use the knife tool to cut vertically. Hit Enter. I'm going to also scale these to 0 along the y-axis, and then move them along the y to snap them. There. Let's go like things even. However, I would like this to stay the same thickness as everything else. So I'm going to double tap G to slide. You can see when I beveled that vertex, it didn't actually combine the mesh. So I'm going to hit A to select everything, merge by distance. You can see we removed 4 vertices. Now when I select this vertex, I can double tap G and slide it. And I don't want to go all the way over. I think I'm going to go to about there. Well, actually, I will move it along the Y, because this will allow me to, if I line these up, G, Z, snap to there. You see, this is too thin, because again, we're going for consistent thickness. But because I snapped them both perfectly in line, then I can hit G, Y, and I can type in a number that I want. Let's say 0.03. I can move this one vertically, GZ 0.03, and those will stay even as I go. Okay, and then I can snap these. Oops, GZ, and we'll snap it right there. This isn't picking up every keystroke for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. I can try screencast keys. I can try get event aggressively, but it may make Blender unstable. So I'm going to turn that on and then save my file immediately and hope Blender doesn't crash on me. Okay, let's go through that again, only faster. I've got that added. I've got it beveled, right? We already merged vertices, so now I can select these edges, X, dissolve edges. Need to rejoin that, so we'll hit J there. And we will go ahead and give that the regular gray color. And I'll use my knife tool to cut down at the bottom there. Okay, that's good. Now we can select this vertex, double tap G, or just move it along the y-axis. This one up and snap it, and then I'll move it back down. G, Z. Looks like negative 0.03 is going to be good again. These GY 0.03. Okay, so that's staying pretty even. Snap these in line. Again, just, oops. Make sure we're going in the right direction. Just to keep everything even. At this point, you can see also the advantage of getting rid of that center glass is these edge loops that we used for this part become useless, so we can hit X and dissolve those. Whoops. Make sure you're in edge mode, because we don't want to select the cross edges. Select those edges and dissolve those. Okay, that's good. Same thing up here. Although, yeah, we can get rid of both of them. There we go. X. Dissolve edges. Just trying to work cleanly with as little geometry as possible for as long as possible. Now, we'll do the same thing on the front here. And let's see how this goes. So, we'll do Control-Shift-B and we'll bevel that. We will dissolve those edges. This one back to the lighter gray. Use the knife tool. Cross with it. Turn. Okay, so we've got all quads still. Double tap, or just move it along the x-axis. This one up along the z. Okay, you can see that I didn't merge those before I moved. So select everything, merge by distance. I removed 2 vertices down here on the bottom right. I can move, then don't mean to hitting all the wrong things. Go back to frame 1. Okay. GX and I'll go negative 0.03. It's been a good number for us so far. GZ negative 0.03. Oh, but that's too thick. I'm gonna go 0.015. We'll just split the difference. GZ 0.015. That's better. Okay, so now up here what we want is, we actually want the taper to go on the outside and on the inside. Let's move that up too. Just snap those together. Okay. Actually, I'm going to dissolve that edge. We're going to cut that down this way. Just grab those vertices, scale them to 0 along the x-axis, snap them in line. I did that because this is the part that's going to become the door, this little kind of cutout door here. So we can just separate that out. I am going to first add in an edge loop here, just to give myself a barrier. I'm going to hit P, separate by selection. Okay, and then we can rename this. Call it machine door. I'm going to call this upper because eventually it's going to be 2 different pieces. That works. And we'll hide that for now. Okay. So Now we need to get this working. This I think I am going to use the other way. So I'm going to add in a couple of edge loops here. See, this one's at an angle, so I'm going to hit E to keep it even and F to flip it so now it's even with the top. Going for roughly squares here. Good. Then I'm going to get rid of that face. Oops. Select the face. I'm going to get rid of that face, and I'm going to dissolve that edge. Dissolve the edge, there we go. Slide this in a little bit and keep it square. All right. So I'm going to select these three and hit F to fill that face. I'm going to select these two and hit J to join them and also cut across. All right, once I have that, I'm going to select all of these vertices. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to knife straight across all of them. Let's give myself a center edge loop there and hit return. Now I'm going to select all of these vertices, and I want to select this one last, this center one here at the intersection of everything. That's the one I want to select last. Okay, so that'll be highlighted in white. So I'll deselect it and reselect, and now that's highlighted white. Now I can hit M and merge at last. It's all going to merge to that point. And then I can select these two edges, X, and dissolve those. Okay. That's good. I'm happy with that. And then we have this little hanger on right here. Let's see, what do we want to do with that face? I think for now we will extrude this down. I'll just hit the Z direction to lock it in there, and then I will fill that in. We'll probably adjust that later, but for now that will work. Okay, so we have all of our tapers cut. Looking at this, I think this needs to be a little bit taller. I'm going to go to side view just because I don't want to go past this taper, because that's where the glass also starts to taper out, and if I bring that geometry up too high, it's going to be a trickier thing to fix. So we'll go to about there. Yeah, that feels better. We can also move this up to, we'll say there. .018. Move this GX 0. Oops. GX 0.018. Okay. Now we just have this vertex that we need to get back in line. You can move it by hand and eyeball it, but if you want to make sure that that stays straight, if you double tap G and slide it all the way over to one vertex, you can double tap G and slide it back, and now it's going to be sliding right along that perfectly even edge, so you can be off a little bit and it'll still stay flat. Okay, cool. So that was probably the trickiest part of this. The rest is just kind of some order of operations stuff, nothing that we haven't done before, with the exception of at the end we'll get into a little bit more topology management, just to try to keep it a clean mesh. So there's a couple of features that I want to focus on now. We need to extrude out our rim that we just made. And then we have this little kind of channel running along that the glass is going to sit in. And then we have these indents at the top and the bottom that just give it some character. And that's all we have left for this piece. So let's get started. We can turn the mirror modifier back on just so we can see what's going on. And I will start with just adding some thickness. So I'm going to hit E, or I'm going to go into face mode. Hit A to select everything, and then I'll hit E to extrude. And I'm going to right click. Okay, that extrusion is still there. Okay, I can move it, you can see it's still there. But it hasn't moved. It's still in the same spot as the original geometry. I'm going to hit Alt S. It's going to scale along normals, which is going to give me a more even scale. And we'll go negative 0.03. Doesn't matter. Something like this. I just say the number in case you want to follow along more exactly. But somewhere like that is pretty good. And then I also, before I do anything else, I want to check offset even. You see that snapped into place there. Just going to maintain or make sure everything has an even thickness there. Okay, so we've got that. Now, let's do the channel next. So for the channel, I'm going to add 2 edge loops. And then I'll right click. Well, you can slide them in towards the, make it slightly uneven. I'll do that. Just so that there's a varying in thickness. It does not make any practical difference. But once I have that selected, I'm going to go and select that face loop. Which again is Alt click on this edge and it'll select the whole loop. Right? Then I'm going to do the same thing that I did to extrude the whole thing. I'm going to hit E to extrude, right click to keep it in place, and then Alt A or Alt S, excuse me. Scale that in. So I go a little bit. I'll check offset even. And let's just kind of look in here. We'll go a little bit further. Somewhere around 0.03 seems to be the number of the day. Yeah, that works. Okay, great. A couple things left to do here. We have those insets and we have this extrusion here. So let's do this this rim extrusion next. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to add in an edge loop right here, and E to keep it even, and make sure that it's snapping to the outside here, where the little red dot is on the outside of the rim. If it's on the inside, you can just hit F, and it will snap to the outside. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a border, and then just to help illustrate this, I'm going to select this border, and this is why good topology is so important, because I can select all of those faces at once because I've got a face loop. And I'm going to just set that back to the regular gray because I'm not going to extrude that out. All right. That's just going to help kind of act as a control loop when I do extrude and when I add the subsurface modifier. So we're going to do the same thing that we did the last 2 times. We're going to hit E to extrude and right click to cancel. Alt S to scale it out. And we don't have to go far. It looks like 0.005 or so is pretty good. We'll check offset even. And there's that. Okay. Now, let's figure out these little indents at the top and the bottom. So we're going to add, again, a couple of edge loops just to define the area, and then we'll do the actual operation. So I'll add an edge loop. We're going to hit E to keep it even, F to flip it so it's even at the bottom. Right about there looks pretty good. Do the same thing up top. E, add an edge loop. And something, I'm going to give myself some space between the details here. I know the reference doesn't really have it, but I want a little bit of space there. So we'll do that. I think that's going to look pretty good. Okay. So now we're ready to actually make the detail, and to do that, I'm going to select these faces. And I'll select the bottom faces. Now, I didn't do the Alt-click, because I don't want to select the back side or the sides. I just want to select the front. That's why I didn't do Alt-click. I only want the front selected, not the sides, not the back. And I'll move my view up here, because I think this will be the easiest angle to see it. Actually, we'll go over here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to inset this. Okay. And then I'm going to hit B to turn off boundary, so it goes across the center. And then once I get to about here, I'm going to hold down, I haven't clicked anything, I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to pull it in a little bit. Now I get that nice taper. Okay. That didn't make sense, you can just rewind and play it back. It's the beauty of YouTube after all. Okay, so we got that nice taper. Now, the back side here, you can see that it does this little end bit. I don't want that, so I'm going to make a change. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Hit the button that hides all of the collections. Okay. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select this face and this face down here. And I'm going to delete those faces. Also on the back side here, I'm going to delete that end face and this end face. And then we also have this center one to consider. The center one, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this one too. Wasn't sure if I wanted to, but yes, I want to. So we'll hit X and we'll delete those faces as well. Okay. So now I can select this edge and I'm going to hit G, X. We're going to snap it right there. On a front view, you can see that that is lined up. I'm going to do the same thing on the side here. Select this edge. Sorry for the camera moving around so much. I'm going to select this edge and I'm going to hit G, Y, snap it in the back. And same thing up top. G, Y, and we'll snap it right there. So now we just need to give ourselves this similar geometry on the back side so that this all flows evenly. So we can add in an edge loop here, and I'm going to just hold down Control, snap right there. Remember, I have vertex snapping set. And I'll just hold Control to temporarily enable it. Another one, and snap it there. Once I have those in place, you can hit F and fill those edges in. Okay. Do it again at the bottom here. Control R, hold down Control and snap. Control R, click. Hold down Control and snap. And then I can select this edge, hit F, and it will fill down the line. Center is going to be a little bit different because we have an extra face there. I'm going to go to front view. We'll do this in wireframe. That might make it easier. I'll extrude it out in the X-axis, and I'll snap it to the end. Okay. And then we'll come around the side here. Select those two. Fill that in. Fill that. F and F. Okay, so now everything is filled in. We have our little detail there that goes right to the edge. I just think it looks a little bit nicer if it goes right to the edge. I also realized I have matte cap on, so I'll go back to studio lighting. a little bit more familiar. All right, so the modeling part is done for this piece. What we need to do now is add in our control loops with a subsurface modifier. So I'm going to collapse the mirror modifier, and I'm going to hit with the object selected in object mode, Control 2, and that's the shortcut for adding a subdivision surface modifier at 2 levels in the viewport. You'd also hit Control 1 to go to 1 level, 3, 4, and up to 5. But we're going to keep it at 2 because that's plenty. I'll right-click and shade smooth. Now it really looks like a helmet, but we don't want a helmet. It's not what we're going for. So tab into edit mode, and I'm going to turn off subdivision in edit mode, because for me it gets in the way more than it helps. And what we need to do is select all of the edges that need to be sharp. So anywhere there's a corner we want to maintain, I'm going to select that edge loop. See, that one doesn't quite work. So select there, here. It's going to be a lot of them. We can always come back later and clean these up. Like that. Okay. So once we have that, just looking at this edge, I'm going to deselect that one and the one below it, because we might need to come at that one a different way. Same thing with this one. Just because they have, there's a pull right there, and that might get tricky. So we'll come back to that one. But I'll come up here just for visual clarity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a offset edge slide. And Shift Control R is the shortcut. So Shift Control R. It's going to go on offset edge slide. You might have to move the mouse around a little bit to figure out where it starts kicking in. I'm also going to hit E to keep this even. And for some reason the red dot doesn't always show up here, but you can see as you slide close, they should look pretty even. And right about there is good. I can tab into object mode, and it's looking better. Still needs some work, but it's definitely looking better. So there's going to be some manual edge loops that we need to add. I think I'm also going to take this opportunity here. I'm going to select all these back faces. I'll clean up the selection here in a second. I don't want those. Just want those. Go into wireframe and make sure that I don't have anything else selected. Okay. I'm just going to extrude it in the X direction just a little bit. Oops, GX. There we go. It just gives it a little bit of thickness. I don't think I'll need it, just in case I do. Okay, so now we can add our control loops. Oops, wrong button. There we go. Control R. And again, hitting E just to keep things even. You can see with that off and on, this part right here wasn't even. Do it again. So without even, with even, this lines up a little bit better. Add something there. E and F to flip it. It's going to be a lot of this and just kind of going around the model and making sure that you hit all of the edges. Okay. You can tab into object mode occasionally and just check your progress. It's probably best to just kind of work from the top down or from forward back. Don't just kind of randomly go about it. For these edge loops, I can do the same offset edge slide, Shift Control R. Again, I'm going to hit E to keep it even. Sometimes they'll go past each other and you'll get this weird shading thing. Just drag your mouse the other way. and then I'll correct those. Okay, that looks much better. See, in here we need some edge loops. You can also see that this didn't go through all the way. So we're going to need to fix this manually. Okay, we'll knife cut that straight across. And then right here, so we've got these two, and we can just hit J and join those. Okay, and now we can add in our edge loop right here. And that's nice and sharp. We got to also do the back side here. Actually go here, hit E to keep it even, F to flip it. Here, E to keep it even. Okay, that looks good. All right, okay, now we've got, I'm probably going to save that for last. I just want to check everything else first. Down at the bottom here, add in one down there. That looks good. And add in one here. Keep that sharp as well. Okay. So these corners, let's see what we can do. Yeah, I think just adding them in manually is going to make that work a much easier. I will hit E to keep them even. And same thing down here. E and F. Oops. Control R, E. There we go. That looks pretty good. Something weird. Oh, okay. That's just the bevel made the shading different. That's all that is. And actually, at this point, I'm going to select all of the faces, and I'm just going to go back to my regular gray shading. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. Also going to make sure we are shading smooth, and we are. Good. Now we've got this corner right here. Same thing. Control R, E to keep it even. And here, Control R, E, keep it even. Okay. Now, this rim, we got to add an edge loop here, here. Looks good. On this inside here, I'm going to add, I think I'm just going to add one. Yeah, that's enough there. It's a thin enough edge that one is plenty. And we'll add in one here. Inside the channel, we tab into object mode, you can see that that gets really smooth and amorphous. So I'm going to add in a couple. Kind of inside the channel there. You see my camera clipping is kicking in here. You can hit N, go to my view, set the clip start to 0.01. We can hit N to hide that. Now I can get in closer. So same thing in here. Something like that is good. Okay, that's sharper. On the back side here, same thing with the rim. Add one in there. That's all we really need on the back side. This is still looking a little bit soft, so let's add in an edge loop right there. It's good. I'm happy with that. Let's take a quick once over here. Yeah. So there's the basis of our vending machine, and I'm going to come in at just about an hour. So part two, we'll add all of the additional kind of finishing touches here to make this look like a thing that could actually vend objects, and that'll come up very shortly here.